What's up, everyone? Going to do a Rangers Q&A for today. Thanks to those of you who submitted questions. If you happen to submit your question after this recording, I apologize. We'll try and answer through the channel in which you submitted the question, and I'll do one of these again next week. So be on the lookout for the tweets or the post on Reddit or whatever prompting the questions. But let's get right to it. First from Scott Walker on Twitter. How do we get Andy Ibanez on the roster? Well, Andy Ibanez, for those who maybe aren't as familiar with that name, he was signed. He's a Cuban defect. No, he doesn't have a defect. He defected from Cuba. I know someone's going to be like, oh, you said he had a defect. He defected from Cuba. The Rangers signed him in 2015 for more than $1 million. He's an infielder who really he plays the infield so his bat can be in the lineup. You know, he's not great defensively. He has gotten better at second and at third. His most likely avenue onto the team is either as the team starting third baseman or as a backup infielder. The challenge with him as a backup infielder is that he doesn't play short well. I mean, he wouldn't be someone you'd consider a backup shortstop. So if the Rangers have 4 bench spots, one is going to go to a catcher, likely Jonah Heim. One is going to go to someone who can back up center field. One is going to go to someone who can back up shorts. And then you've got that 4th bench spot. And so, you know, that would be the spot Andy Ibanez is competing for. Or the Rangers can elect to, name him the starting third baseman. I think with Ibanez, at some point this year, the Rangers are going to need to give him a shot at the big league level, whether it's on opening day or somewhere down the road in 2021, because, they've invested a lot of time in him, and it's kind of now or never. He's 27 years old. He's, his bats looked good, not just this camp, but, in 2019, his last full season, he had a good year. I think he had north of an 800 OPS at AAA. So they're going to have to figure out a way to just see, hey, is this a big league hitter or not? And if it's not an opening day, I imagine it will happen at some point this year. All right, this from Scott. Scott Jeffries wants to know, do you feel that Shinsu Chu was given proper appreciation from Rangers fans? I have a feeling that in these lean years, Chu's value will be more apparent. Scott, I had a number of Twitter posts basically suggesting that Shinsu Chu was underappreciated and that he actually did end up living up to the contract. Back when the Rangers signed Chu, guys were not getting paid for defense then as much as they are now. Jason Hayward signed that huge contract in large part because he was considered maybe the best right fielder defensively in all of baseball. If you look at his numbers, it's not like he's got these amazing offensive numbers. Well, that contract and that trend started after the Rangers signed Chu. People just weren't paying for defense back then. The Rangers signed him because they needed a leadoff hitter. They needed someone who could get on base, and Chu did that. In his first season, 2014, that was the year the Rangers dealt with all the injuries. Everyone got hurt. It was like you didn't know, like on a given night, like you'd see someone in the starting lineup be like, I never even heard of that guy. Because they were just cycling guys up and down and in and out of the organization. And Chu, he's a guy who, and I think it's a cultural thing, but he has a ton of pride and a loyalty and a sense of responsibility. He had just signed this big deal, and he continued to play through a back injury that probably would have kept guys out for, a month plus. And so the numbers weren't good. If you take out that 2014 season, you look at his numbers from 2015 beyond, this guy was one of the best at getting on base in Major League Baseball. His on-base percentage with the Rangers after that 2014 season was around 380, 375. That's an elite on-base guy. So, yeah, I do think that, he was perhaps underappreciated. From BJ on Twitter, how's Brock Burke's rehab coming along? Looking forward to seeing him again. BJ actually interacted with Brock yesterday. It is, it is just what you kind of asked. It is coming along. I think he's, throwing. I think throwing off a mound is something that's coming up. And then, he's a guy who likely would be an option at the big league level in June, maybe July. They're going to want to get him some minor league games under his belt. But he is progressing, and it'll be interesting to follow. Brock Burke, of course, had labrum surgery around this time last year. From Ethan, will Isaiah Kiner-Falefa be a core piece of this club when they contend? Well, Ethan, I guess it depends on how you define core. I think of David Murphy. David Murphy was not someone who was hitting third, fourth, or fifth in the lineup. He was not a franchise player, but he was an important part, an important piece of the puzzle, those really good teams. And I think that could be Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Now, my answer might be different this time next year than it is right now, because, he has really worked on his bat. And if he can continue to make improvements as a hitter, then, hey, maybe we're telling a different tale a year from now. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is outstanding defensively. His versatility is incredibly impressive, but he's yet to have an OPS over 700 in a season in his career. And league average is about 730, 740. It used to be closer to 750. And you're not even getting all-star consideration unless your OPS is, over 800, in most cases. So core piece, tough to say, tough to give him that kind of responsibility right now. But I do think that, he's someone who's going to have a chance to show that he can be a part of that, the next wave of really good teams in that way. I think right now, if Isaiah Kiner-Falefa made no improvements beyond where he is right now, I think I'd look at him and say, hey, this is a great guy to have off the bench on a really competitive team. From GG Joe on Twitter, what do the Rangers see in Curtis Terry, and what role could he have for them this year, and at what and at the expense of what other players? It's a good question. So I appreciate you considering the last part, because not everyone can play, right? I think Curtis Terry, they see him as a bat, and someone who's had success coming up through the system. He's not really defensively gifted necessarily. He's fine around the bag. I think with Curtis Terry, his opportunity is going to come if and when there's an injury. I mean, there always is, right? There are injuries. I don't know if the Rangers can keep both Ronald Guzman and Nate Lowe at the big league level. And if they go with Guzman, then Lowe can be optioned to AAA. If they go with Lowe, then Guzman is going to either have to clear waivers or, he'll be in a different organization. So that could cut into the first base depth. And at that point, Curtis Terry could be one injury away from getting a call up, whether it's as a first baseman or as a DH. I don't foresee Curtis Terry like taking the reins from Nate Lowe and relegating Nate Lowe to the bench. So I don't know that it's necessarily at the expense of anyone. Maybe it's at the expense of a guy like Andy Ibanez, someone who is just a bat, and they got to find a way to get that guy in the lineup. Even though they don't play the same position, there's always a guy that you can finagle, right? This guy plays a few positions, you can get him here and then move that guy there and this guy there, and you can get him in there. So I think he is a first baseman on the depth chart, but I think he also kind of competes or will compete for playing time for bats that the Rangers just want to get in the lineup. From Kenny, what's your biggest surprise so far, and which player makes the team who you didn't expect? Well, it's a really good question. I'll tell you this. I don't know whether Eli White makes the team or not. I came into camp thinking that Eli White has next to no chance. And unfortunately, Leote struggles, but Eli White also performing well definitely has given him a chance. Taylor Hearn has looked good. I think I don't know how much surprise is tough because he's done this in the past, but Mike Fultonevich pumping mid-90s stuff once again is a really pleasant surprise. I mean, he's not someone who I obviously didn't think was going to make the team. I'm just kind of going through the depth chart right now. Guys who have really impressed. Brett DeGuss has looked good. We knew what we were going to get from Wes Benjamin, a guy who's going to pound the zone. Just looking. Give me a second. I want to go to these guys. Check these out. Guys who I didn't think would make the – well, okay, how about Matt Bush? I mean – the guy was out of baseball essentially because of injuries for 2 years. I think Matt Bush is the answer. He's got a great chance to make this team, and it's just a surprise. I don't know, coming into camp, hearing from people who had seen him throw saying that it looks really good again. I guess that mitigated the surprise. But just big ppicture, if you would have asked me 2 months ago, Matt Bush, major league pitcher again, I'd be like, huh? Matt Bush, really? So I think there's a surprise there with Matt Bush. That'd probably be the best answer. And as you can tell, I'm kind of, I don't know, for better or for worse, I copy and paste these questions, and I don't really do, I kind of want to answer them organically without bottled up answers, stock answers. So some of these are just kind of on the fly. From Bradley Moss, who do you think will be the Rangers' best starting pitcher this year? Well, you know what? It's a great question. I think it's Dane Dunning or Mike Fultonevich. If Mike Fultonevich maintains this velocity, I think he's got a really good chance to be that guy. Dane Dunning is someone who, I'm really excited about. The problem with guys like Dane Dunning and Taylor Hearn and Wes Benjamin and Kyle Cody, all of whom have looked good this camp, is that there's going to be a cap on what they're allowed to do. I don't expect those guys to throw more than 100, 125 innings. So they're not necessarily going to be used in a traditional sense as a starter going 6-7 innings, whereas Mike Fultonevich, I think, will have that opportunity. So I think of the young guys, Dane Dunning, Taylor Hearns looked really good. But of the guys who I think will be treated like a starter in a traditional sense, I'll go with Mike Fultonevich. From Jeff Malone, how does the delay in the minor league season affect the delay in the minor league season start affect the way the Rangers can promote and designate players? That's a great question, Jeff. And it's something that I think a lot of organizations are still trying to figure out what they're going to do with certain guys. So the challenges here, and for those who are kind of unsure what we're talking about, the AAA season, AA season was always going to start in May. The AAA season was scheduled to start in April, but a lot of people never really believed that would be the case. It's going to now start in May. So guys who are not on the big league team and are on the taxi squad, there are one of two options. They're either in Arizona at minor league camp, or they're in Arlington, a part of the alternate site. The benefit of the alternate site is that you're available right away. You don't have to go through intake testing, because to be a part of it, you already had to go through that. The benefit of Arizona is that you're actually getting to play real competition, even in the form of exhibition games, which you're not going to get at the alternate site, to stay fresh and to stay game ready. My guess is pitchers who they anticipate as possible options, soon, will go to the alternate site. A guy like Josh Young will likely go, or stay in Arizona to get as many at-bats as possible. I could be wrong. Maybe that's mixed, and it's probably a mixed bag from both position players and pitchers, but that strategy is definitely going to be interesting to follow. From Sean, does Joey Gallo make the big league roster with the Rangers? Yes, he does, Sean. I don't think Joey gets traded before opening day. If there is a trade, it's going to be closer to the deadline. And I think, one reason why is Joey's value is not where, I think the Rangers believe it can be, because he's not coming off a great offensive year. If he has a good offensive year, that could change the value and help their case. From Adam on Twitter, thoughts about the news of Jordan Lyles being a non-traditional starter? What has been the views of him so far in camp? I know Woodward said obviously wasn't pleased. He said Woodward said Lyles wasn't pleased with the news, but seems to be in a good place. So he's looked good. It's been 3 innings, so tough to say, but he has looked good. He really had a tough time locating his curveball last year, so hitters were really able to eliminate it. If they saw it, they just sort of let it go, and it made him more or less a one-pitch pitcher. He's worked on curveball command. He's improved his slider. So, I think there are hopefully improvements to be had. I think with Jordan, frankly, if you look at his 2020 season, he didn't necessarily earn, the right to just come into camp with, a starter's role. I think, again, we talked about the young pitchers who are going to be used as non-traditional starters or piggyback guys versus the vets who might, have more of an opportunity to give you 6-7 innings a night. Jordan has that opportunity. He's not going to start the year with that level of responsibility. But unlike Taylor Hearn, let's say, Taylor Hearn is just outstanding. It's not like they're going to tell Taylor, hey, all of a sudden, 7 innings. I think they really want to be diligent in keeping him and these young guys on a leash. Lyles starts pitching well, then you're going to start to see Jordan Lyles go deeper in a game, 6-7 innings, like a starter traditionally would. From Chip, I feel like this is a young team. Am I right? If so, how do we compare amongst the youngest teams in Major League Baseball? It's tough to know, Chip, just because teams haven't set their lineups, and there are a lot of decisions that can be made that could make a team a lot younger or maybe not as young. But yes, this is going to be one of the youngest teams, both in age and Major League experience throughout the season. From Devin, when looking at the Rangers teams from a decade ago and comparing them to now, what do you feel is the biggest reason for their struggle to return to sustained success? I think, Devin, I would point to the reasons why they had sustained success. And that's that they were hitting on all cylinders. They were drafting well. They were developing. They were making shrewd moves in the trade market, international signings, the draft, and developing and free agency, both big names and role players. It's not like the Rangers have totally struck out in all areas, but in order to be a team that's going to have sustained success at a high level, you really have to be clicking on all cylinders, or maybe all but one of those different avenues to build a team. And so I just think that in general, they've lacked in a few areas. And obviously, I don't know, Is it the drafting? Is it the developing? Is it both? Is it some bad luck mixed in with injuries and stuff? Probably all of the above. But the Rangers have not been able to generate the type of production from the draft that a lot of teams have, and that has been a challenge. From Jake, what's the percent chance Josh Young gets called up? At some point this year, 100%, as long as he's healthy. I would say that it's close to 0% unless injuries happen in front of him for opening day. I think, he hasn't even had any AA bats. They want to just get him a little more work before he gets called up. There's no reason to rush him either. From Kenneth, similar question. How far out do you think Young still is? Again, if this was like a normal year and AAA would start, AA would start in April, I'd say 2 months away. I don't know how the delay is going to impact his timeline, but I do expect to see Josh Young before the All-Star break. This one from Adrian Beltre for president on Reddit, I believe. How many non-roster invites do you think end up making the team? Also, with Hernandez going down, who do you think steps up to support the back end of the bullpen other than Leclerc? So I think with the bullpen, it's going to be multiple guys. I don't think it's just going to be one guy because of Jonathan Hernandez's ability and his role. I think two names to look out for. I think I think Ian Kennedy is a guy who, if he makes the team, could be a back end guy who gives you more than 3 outs the way they're hoping to utilize Jonathan Hernandez. And I think I mentioned him before, but I think Matt Bush is a guy who could step up and take advantage. Gosh, there's someone else. Who am I thinking of? We talked about Brett. Hunter Wood. Hunter Wood's an interesting name. He's at a really good camp. I think Hunter Wood's got a shot. And so non-roster guys, the guys who I think have legitimate shots to make the team, non-roster guys, Matt Bush, Ian Kennedy. I'm just going down the list. Hunter Wood. From a position player standpoint, I think both Charlie Culberson and Brock Holt have really good chances. Andy Ibanez technically is a non-roster guy as well. All three will not, and there's a chance only one. My guess is there's a chance that 2 make the team. If Brock Holt is the starting third baseman, then Charlie Culberson will make it as a backup utility infielder. Because of Charlie's ability to play short better than Brock Holt, if Rougned Odor ends up starting at third, it might be tough to keep both Holt and Culberson. And it might be Culberson who gets the nod. Delino DeShields has a chance to be the backup center fielder. He's got a shot as well. But right now it might be Eli White who's ahead of him in that competition. From Squitchy, what's your dream scenario with Joey? Is it that he mashes early and we re-sign, or does he mash and we trade? All the different scenarios. I mean, my dream scenario is that Scott Boras' agent allows him to sign an extension before he hits free agency, and the Rangers are able to do it at a reasonable price, and Joey, becomes the hitter more consistently moving forward that he was in 2019. I think what's most realistic from a dream standpoint, because signing an extension before free agency is just borderline unrealistic with Scott Boras clients. I think that he has a great start to the year, and the Rangers are able to maximize value. As much as I don't want to see Joey go, I just think that it seems to be the most realistic and most likely outcome. I'd love for the Rangers to get a top 50 prospect and a top 100 prospect. So 2 prospects in the top 100 for him. But if you go and look at recent trades, especially if it's just for a guy, you're not seeing teams part ways with those guys nearly as much. From Scott, who do you think is going to have the better season in Oakland this year? Mitch Moreland, Jake Diekman, or Elvis Andrus? And who are you rooting for the most to have a boost to their career again in different jerseys? I think Jake Diekman's going to have the best year. I mean, he's been really good. Mitch is going to be used as a kind of a role player type. Elvis is going to be their everyday shortstop. I mean, I root for all of them. I don't know that there's one I root for more than others. It's tough to pick. I want all of them to have success. Obviously, not against the Rangers, but I do think Jake's going to have the best year of the 3. From Dan on Twitter, what's your first early impression of Chris Young? Is this the voice that desperately needed to be brought in to fix the organization, especially in the pitching development and scouting? Dan, it's just been tough with COVID to really have a true early impression. He's a super nice guy. He's tall, I can tell you that. But just talking to people who are involved, he's someone who he's not going to be agreeable for the sake of being agreeable. He's an ideas guy. He's he's a problem solver, and he just brings a different dynamic, different perspective, a different voice into the room and into the decision-making room. But as far as, what his direct impact is going to be, it's just tough to say at this point. And then finally from Derek, will Colby Allard be a future ace in this organization? Derek, and just for everyone, I don't think every team is an ace, right? I think an ace is something that some teams might have multiple aces. Other teams might not have an ace. So, I don't think that an ace is just necessarily the number one starter in an organization. I don't think Colby Allard is a guy who profiles as an ace. I think Colby Allard's a guy who profiles as like a number 4 starter in a really good rotation. There's nothing wrong with that. Those guys are starting big playoff games for you. He's obviously got some room for growth here. He has worked on the cutter and making that more consistent and then being less predictable. What I love about Colby, he's still young. He's got a lot of physical growth here, but I think up here mentally, he's incredibly sharp. He understands pitching. And I think he's also got a really competitive kind of bulldog, not going to back down type of mentality. And you might roll your eyes and say, well, don't they all? No, not all these guys are like impeccable when it comes to mental strength and toughness. Not all these guys do so well when they get knocked down. I think Colby Allard's a guy who does profile well in that regard. A lot of great questions. I appreciate y'all. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in. We'll do another Q&A next week. Until then, take care.